Welcome to Story Ripple, a home for those who love to be read to. Hi, my name is Mary and I love to read books out loud. Let me share some best beloved books with you. These books have been sending out ripples of enjoyment for over 60 years. So no matter how you're feeling today, happy or sad, excited or anxious, I hope you can relax. Grab a pillow or a favorite stuffed animal and get ready to listen. It's time for a story. I'll take you into some fantastical worlds created by books. Little Snow White by the Brothers Grimm. It was in the middle of winter when the flakes of snow were falling like feathers from the sky, and a queen sat at a window sewing, and the frame of the window was made of black ebony. And whilst she was sewing and looking out of the window at the snow, she pricked her finger with the needle, and 3 drops of blood fell upon the snow. And the red looked pretty upon the white snow, and she thought to herself, "Would that I had a child as white as snow, with cheeks as red as blood, and hair as black as the wood of the window frame." Soon after that she had a little daughter, who was as white as snow, with cheeks as red as blood, and her hair was as black as ebony. And she was therefore called Little Snow White. And when the child was born, the queen died. After a year had passed, the king took to himself another wife. She was a beautiful woman, but proud and haughty, and she could not bear that anyone else should surpass her in beauty. She had a wonderful looking glass, and when she stood in front of it and looked at herself in it, she said, looking glass on the wall, who in this land is the fairest of all?" And the looking glass answered, "Thou, O Queen, art the fairest of all." Then she was satisfied, for she knew that the looking glass spoke the truth. But Snow White was growing up and grew more and more beautiful. And when she was 7 years old, she was as beautiful as the day and more beautiful than the queen herself. And once, when the queen asked her looking glass on the wall, who in this land is the fairest of all?" it answered, "Thou art fairer than all who are here, Lady Queen, but more beautiful still is Snow White, as I ween." Then the queen was shocked and turned yellow and green with envy. From that hour, whenever she looked at Snow White, her heart heaved in her breast and she hated the girl. With envy and pride that grew higher and higher in her heart like a weed, she had no peace day or night. She called a huntsman and said, "Take the child away into the forest and kill her. I will no longer have her in my sight." The huntsman obeyed and took her away. But when he had drawn his knife and was about to pierce Snow White's innocent heart, she began to weep and said, "Ah, dear huntsman, leave me my life. I will run away into the wild forest and never come home again." And as she was so beautiful, the huntsman had pity on her and said, "Run away then, you poor child. The wild beasts will soon have devoured you," thought he, and yet it seemed as if a stone had been rolled from his heart, since it was no longer needful for him to kill her. But now the poor child was all alone in the great forest, and so terrified that she looked at every leaf of every tree and did not know what to do. Then she began to run, and ran over sharp stones and through thorns, and the wild beasts ran past her, but did her no harm. She ran as long as her feet would go until it was almost evening. Then she saw a little cottage and went into it to rest herself. Everything in the cottage was small, but neater and cleaner than can be told. There was a table on which was a white cover and 7 little plates, and on each plate a little spoon. Moreover, there were 7 little knives and forks, and 7 little mugs. Against the wall stood 7 little beds side by side and covered with snow-white counterpanes. Little Snow White was so hungry and thirsty that she ate some of the vegetables and bread from each plate and drank a drop of wine out of each mug, for she did not wish to take all from only one. Then, as she was so tired, she laid herself down on one of the little beds, but none of them suited her. One was too long, another too short, but at last she found that the 7th one was right, and so she remained in it, said a prayer, and went to sleep. When it was quite dark, the owners of the cottage came back. They were 7 dwarfs who dug and delved in the mountains for ore. They lit their 7 candles, and as it was now light within the cottage, they saw that someone had been there, for everything was not in the same order in which they had left it. The first one said, "Who has been sitting in my chair?" The second said, "Who has been eating off my plate?" The third said, "Who has been taking some of my bread?" The fourth said, "Who has been eating my vegetables?" The fifth said, "Who has been using my fork?" The sixth said, "Who has been cutting with my knife?" The seventh said, "Who has been drinking out of my mug?" Then the first looked around and saw that there was a little hole on his bed, and he said, "Who has been getting into my bed?" The others came up and each called out, "Somebody has been laying in my bed too." But the 7th, when he looked at his bed, saw little Snow White, who was lying asleep therein, and he called the others, who came up running. They cried out with astonishment and brought their 7 little candles and let the light fall on Snow White. "Oh heavens, oh heavens," they cried, "what a lovely child!" And they were so glad that they did not wake her up, and let her sleep on in the bed. And the 7th dwarf slept with his companions 1 hour with each, and so got through the night. When it was morning, little Snow White awoke, and was frightened when she saw the 7 dwarfs. But they were friendly and asked her what her name was. "My name is Snow White," she answered. "How have you come to our house?" asked the dwarfs. Then she told them that her stepmother had wished to have her killed, but that the huntsman had spared her life, and that she had to run for the whole day, until at last she had found their dwelling. The dwarfs said, "If you will take care of our house, cook, make the beds, wash, sew, and knit, and if you keep everything neat and clean, you can stay with us, and you shall want for nothing." "Yes," said Snow White, "with all my heart," and she stayed with them. She kept the house in order for them. In the mornings they went to the mountains and looked for copper and gold. In the evenings they came back, and then their supper had to be ready. The girl was alone most of the day, so the good dwarfs warned her and said, "Beware your stepmother. She will soon know that you are here. Be sure to let no one come in." But the queen, believing that Snow White was dead, could not but think that she was again the first and most beautiful of all, and she went to her looking glass and said, looking glass on the wall, who in this land is the fairest of all?" And the glass answered, "O queen, thou art fairest of all I see. But over the hills, where the 7 dwarfs dwell, Snow White is still alive and well, and none is so fair as she." Then she was astounded, for she knew that the looking glass never spoke falsely, and she knew that the huntsman had betrayed her, and that little Snow White was still alive. And so she thought and thought again how she might kill her, for as long as she was not the fairest in the whole land, envy let her have no rest. And when she had at last thought of something to do, she painted her face and dressed herself like an old peddler woman, so no one could have known her. In this disguise she went over the 7 mountains to the 7 dwarfs, and knocked at the door and cried, "Pretty things to sell, very cheap, very cheap." Little Snow White looked out the window and called out, Good day, my good woman. What have you to sell? Good things, pretty things, she answered. Stay laces for your dresses of all colors. And she pulled out one which was woven of bright colored silk. I may let this worthy old woman in, thought Snow White, and she unbolted the door and bought the pretty laces. Child, said the old woman, what a fright you look. Come, I will lace your dress properly for once. Snow White had no suspicion, but stood before her and let herself be laced with the new laces. But the old woman laced so quickly and so tightly that Snow White lost her breath and fell down as if dead. Now I am the most beautiful, said the queen to herself, and ran away. Not long afterwards in the evening, the 7 dwarfs came home. But how shocked they were when they saw their dear little Snow White lying dead on the ground, and that she neither stirred nor moved and seemed to be dead. They lifted her up, and as they saw that her dress was laced too tightly, they cut the laces, and then she began to breathe a little, and after a while came to life again. When the dwarfs heard what had happened, they said, the old peddler woman was no one else than the wicked queen. Take care and let no one come in when we are not with you. But the wicked woman, when she reached home, went in front of the glass and said, looking glass on the wall, who in this land is the fairest of all? And it answered, O queen, thou art fairest of all I see. But over the hills where the 7 dwarfs dwell, Snow White is still alive and well, and none so fair as she.